Well, hello there. We're back. And you are too, if you've been on one of our presentations on Facebook Live before. And if you haven't been, welcome. And we're going to give you another sample of our work. We're going to be talking today. The title of our presentation is The Real Deal About Deal Breakers. And I'm going to get to what we mean by that in a minute, because this is a subject that we probably get more questions about than any other single issue that involves relationships. Because, one of the things that people are always wondering about is, how do you know when to hang in there and when it's time just to let go and move on? What is a deal breaker? And how do you deal with that? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today, not just defining it and explaining what it is that we're talking about, but we're also going to be looking at various examples of things that can be deal breakers in relationships. And there really is no generic definition of what are the specific deal breakers in relationships, because it's so subjective. For some people, one thing could be a deal breaker. It could just that I can't tolerate that. That's the end of the relationship, period. And for somebody else, they might be able to live with it, or they might be able to find ways to deal with it, with that condition that allows them to continue to be in relationship together and maybe even deepen the connection of the relationship. So, basically a deal breaker is any condition that exists within a relationship in which one person is unable to tolerate the continuation of that condition. Mm-hmm. And it's not the condition itself, but it's really the capacity, the ability to tolerate that, to live with that in the relationship. So we're going to be talking about what some of those things can be. And we're also going to be looking at ways in which you can approach that and deal with those situations in ways that can enable the relationship to continue, should both parties want that. Mm-hmm.
So I'm greeting you and saying hello, especially to Jeanette and Donna, who have been with us before. I love it that you're tuned in with us again. And this is a really important subject. And I want to talk about the 3 top deal breakers. These are the ones that are really quite obviously toxic to relationship. And they all begin with A. That would be addiction, abuse, and adultery. And it isn't the addiction to the drugs and alcohol or the sex addiction on ongoing adultery or the verbal abuse. It could be psychological, emotional abuse, or it could be physical abuse that takes it into the deal breaker category. What moves it into the deal breaker category is the denial about the issue and how severe it is and how it's robbing the partnership of vitality. It's the insistence that there is minimizing the problem, that there isn't a problem at all, or making it small rather than seeing the heavy impact that it's having on the relationship, which is going to deteriorate the relationship and end up taking it down. There are some things that aren't quite as blatant as the adultery and the abuse and the addiction. And these are in a category that's a little harder to put your hands on. One of them is a significant values difference. And all couples, they have some differences, maybe even differences in values, but there are some where it is such a enlarged discrepancy in their values that it could be over the line into deal breaker. And I'll give you a really obvious example. If one person values family life and they're determined that they want to have children, and the other person is closed to the idea of having children for whatever reason, you can't have half a child. So that would be an area where you couldn't come to terms. No matter how much therapy you did with the best therapy around, there still was going to be this basic values difference. Another example would be sometimes there's a breakdown in a relationship. A person makes a mistake. Maybe they break an agreement. Maybe it's even a serious agreement. And that isn't the problem that takes it into the deal breaker category. It can be the lack of forgiveness on the part of the person who's been wounded and feels victimized and violated and betrayed. Because people really can learn from their mistakes, and if the person is sincerely sorry and apologize and is wanting to make amends, and I've learned my lesson here, I want you to open to me and give me a chance, and the other person is closed, rigidly closed and unforgiving, that can be the kiss of death in relationship. And so these things that can be basic differences can take you down, but I want to mention that they don't start out in the deal breaker category. They start out as a small, medium, or large difficulty in the relationship. It's not tending to them. It's not getting help with them. It's not really healing those things that are difficult, which take it into the deal breaker category, because it festers, it gets infected over time. So sometimes we use the analogy of the difficulty in the relationship is like an infected boil that needs to be lanced, and although it needs to be pierced, and it could be painful when it's pierced, that truth telling about admitting that it's a serious problem is what can lead to the healing.
Yeah, it can be painful to acknowledge a wound, physical or emotional, that is in need of attention and care and healing. And a lot of us can be quite skilled in the art of denial or avoidance, because it is a lot less uncomfortable to just push things aside in the hopes that they'll go away, or in the hopes that things might change, or in the hopes that the other person might change in some way. There's nothing wrong with occasional denial to, minimize if you just don't feel ready to confront something. But at some point, if it doesn't change on its own, which often it won't, it really requires attention. And the longer a primary difference between two people is allowed to continue, that is one that is basically preventing them from having a deeper connection and a closer understanding with each other, then the more difficult it's going to be to repair it. So one of the first things that we encourage people to do is to acknowledge and tell the truth to yourself. First of all, that, I really can't continue to live with this situation, or this really isn't working for me. I mean, whatever words you want to use, but to tell the truth to yourself that this is something that I cannot have been trying to, but I can't continue to tolerate that. It's something that really gets in my way of honoring my own integrity, my own truth. And that's the most important step, is to begin to acknowledge that to yourself. Now, obviously, if you're not in a committed relationship with somebody and you notice that they have certain behaviors or tendencies or practices or beliefs that are really incompatible with you, it's best to find out as early on as possible, is there some way that we can both get on the same page here? Not that we have to agree about everything. There's a lot of times that Linda and I have, agreed to disagree. Well, look, I see it this way, you see it that way. We'll just have to live with these differences. In a lot of cases, all relationships require some degree of that kind of accommodation. The question is, where's the line? Where is the line that I cannot cross without violating my own truth in some way? And where is my willingness and their willingness to make adjustments or accommodations to see if we can move towards each other's positions in some way.
So I want to give you an example of that. Usually there's one in the pair that's more introverted, perhaps they're more private, and the other person who's more of an expressor and they're more open. And that can become divisive if you're polarized. This can be a values difference. One person really values privacy and the other person really prizes more openness. And so if you are suffering, if you're uncomfortable, if you feel abandoned, if you feel that the other person is so withdrawn that you're shut out of their life and you really need more connection, to first tell yourself the truth about that and then to be honest with them about how much distress it's causing you. So not to be pain tolerant. We find this a lot with the people that we work with in therapy and in workshops, that they're so pain tolerant that they suck it up. Do you know, they try to overlook, they excuse, they rationalize, they justify, rather than speaking the truth to themselves and then to their partner that they need more connection. And if you are isolating and not telling the truth first to your partner and then to a broader amount of people, if you have a therapist, to be able to tell the truth to them about how distressed you may be about the particular areas that could move into the deal breaker category or may already be in the deal breaker category. But we find that people isolate so much and they send the good image out to their friendship network and their family because they're ashamed that they don't, have the great relationship that they want to have, that compounds the original problem so that they feel so alone with it and they feel so stuck with it. And it's hard to move. It's hard to make changes. And the last thing I want to say about that is sometimes a relationship can look like it's dead. Do you know? It looks like it's been so battered by whatever the difficulty is, but it really is only in a coma. And that with proper treatment, it could revive and thrive. And what could have looked like it was going to be the kiss of death can end up being the kiss of life once that, difficult, unhealed, unwholesome agreement that the two people have been participating in is really properly healed.
Yeah, I want to underscore the phrase the two people have been participating in. When we think about a deal, what is a deal? What is a good deal? When you think about a good deal, it's usually something in which I am going to come out with the better end of the stick than the other person. A good deal is one in which I have a better advantage. The thing about relationships, particularly committed partnerships, is there's only one kind of a good deal, and that's one in which both of us feel that we have gotten exactly, or as not exactly, but we are satisfied with the outcome. Mm-hmm. In a committed partnership, if one person is satisfied, they think that they got a good deal, and the other person is not satisfied, then that situation is ultimately going to affect in a negative way both partners. In committed partnerships, it really is either win-win or lose-lose. Because even if one of us feels like we got the better end of the deal, then at some point it will break down. The other person will be affected by that, and there may be resentment. There may be a diminishment of trust in the relationship. There could be consequences that are negative for both parties. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about creating a good deal, we mean something that really works to the benefit of both people. And the best way to prevent deal breakers is just to have the intention to only make agreements that ultimately we both feel good about, to create understandings that we want our partner to feel as satisfied with the outcome as we do, because that's going to deepen the foundational qualities of the relationship. It's going to deepen trust. It's going to deepen respect. It's going to deepen the feeling of well-being for both people. It's going to strengthen the bond. And those are all foundational aspects of the relationship. And every time we create some kind of agreement, some kind of a deal, we have the opportunity to do that. So, we're always, the good news about relationships is there's never any shortage of opportunities to create more goodwill in the relationship. And when we keep the other person's well-being in mind and we want them to be as satisfied as we are, then we're likely to minimize. It's not we're going to avoid it or prevent it, because there are going to be some deal breaker situations that come up in almost all relationships. Mm-hmm. But we can minimize the damage.
And the way we bring topics up to invite our partner to work with the issues that could possibly threaten the well-being of the relationship means a lot. We are not fans of threats and ultimatums. It's very different to say, I'm fearful if this condition were to continue, that what's so out of the result of that could be very divisive. It could either break us up or we could stay together, and it would bring our level of happiness down lower. And that's different than say, if you don't, I'm out of here. That tends to back people up. Nobody wants to be threatened and controlled. So to bring it to their attention, the level of dissatisfaction and unhappiness, and also the vision of what could heal the relationship, is so important. But we have to believe ourselves first. We have to believe that it's possible. We have to have a vision of what that would look like. We have to see how we may have been complicit in the difficulty of the relationship, how we may have been codependent, how we may have been promoting, even unwittingly, the person's drug or alcohol use, may have been complicit in some way in allowing for disrespectful emotional abuse to take place. And to lead with what my work is to do and what I see I could shift to be a contribution here tends to invite reciprocity. Then the other person can start thinking along the lines of how I might contribute to making this relationship a more healthy and wholesome one. Yes, I would be considering going to get some help with a therapist that we both agree on, or going to see a clergy. I trust the pastor at the church. Let's start there and talk to him or her. I'm willing to talk to my trusted family member. I'm willing to talk to my brother, my uncle, my grandfather. And if we choose to talk to a friend, we must educate the friend how to support us, not to collude with us and say, oh yeah, men are all like that. They're so selfish and self-centered. Or, oh, women, they're all crazy and irrational. You can't reason with them. We need to have somebody in our life, and more is better, who will help us to see how we might be getting in our own way. That's profound support. So we want to make agreement with somebody that we turn to have confidentiality and help me see myself. Help me to see if I may be contributing unwittingly to making this situation be what it is, because I really am committed to improving it. I believe that it could get better. I love him or her, so I want it to last, but I don't want to just stand it and bear it. I want to have a good relationship. I want to have a wholesome, healthy relationship.
So if you've been listening to any of our other talks, you know that we use the R word quite a bit. No, not relationships, responsibility. And that's really what Linda's talking about. It's very tempting, and it's very obvious to us what the other person's real problem is that they need to.
Isn't it so obvious?
Deal with.
Their part in it is so obvious.
It's very tempting to point that out to them, and supportively, lovingly encourage them to take care of business. What's not quite so easy to do is to take responsibility for recognizing and acknowledging and then even acting in upon my own recognition of what's the part that I've played in this situation that has brought us to this point. Not that, I'm the one that's at fault, but also not that she's the one that's at fault, but to really know, and with the years of experience that we've had working with couples where we have never found a situation in which one person was 100% to blame or responsible for being where the couple is. Sometimes it's 99 to 1. Sometimes it's 36 to 64. It's rarely 50-50. But we don't get into the details of that. What we know for sure is that when there's a breakdown that isn't working for one or both people, that there are ways in which they both contributed to it. And unless we're both willing to look to see how each one of us has participated such that this is the result that we have, it's going to be really difficult for us to work together as a team to see if we can come up with a solution to this situation. The degree to which we can take responsibility for recognizing our part is the degree to which we are able to access the ability and the insights to see what we can now do. Because if I don't see what I have done that's brought us here, for better or worse, then I can't really see what I can do in the future. So we're always wanting people to be willing, and this is one of the most difficult aspects of dealing with differences in relationships, is to be willing to look at how you might have played a part in this, because it is so much more obvious all the time what they've done, to create this mess than it is what we've done to participate in that process.
So it may be that you feel like you have the moral high ground. I'm not the one that had the affair. I'm not the one that abuses drugs. I'm not the one that's got the wicked temper. But there may be a part that we're playing in it, and when we do our part differently, that means that they are likely to have to dance a little differently with us. And the best news about getting off of our high horse in the moral high ground, where I'm the innocent bystander here and I'm victimized by the awful things that they're doing, that it gets us out of the victim mentality, because the victim mentality of perpetrators and victims, and he or she is the wicked one and I'm the innocent one, that is a demoralizing kind of an attitude.
It's also incredibly disempowering to feel yourself to be the victim, because a victim is powerless to do anything. They've been acted upon.
So if you can move out of the victim mentality to find even a small part that you might have been playing before and a small part that you could shift to do it differently now, it gives you a sense of efficacy. It gives you a sense of potency. It gives you a sense of, this is workable. I'm not just stuck here. I'm not powerless here. I'm not just an innocent bystander. I'm not just a victim. I will do everything in my power to see if this system can move, if the system can heal, with my truth telling, with cultivating patience, with cultivating forgiveness. Maybe it's cultivating understanding. Maybe it's cultivating courage, to take some risks or to speak some truths that are difficult. Maybe it's growing some skill building, communication, conflict management skills, or negotiation skills. But if we can take ownership that I am a force, I am powerful, I can be a healer of myself in this relationship, rather than just having it be in the holding pattern. We're not about advocating holding patterns, either getting on with it or getting on with letting go.
I know that we're getting close to time that we have to finish. And I just want to mention that one of the ways in which we unknowingly, unwittingly sometimes are setting ourselves up to feel like a victim is by trying to tolerate deal-breaking conditions too long.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that my partner has a real problem containing their violent impulses, and that they can sometimes be abusive. And I might rationalize that or justify it or in some way try to tolerate it, even though there's a part of me that knows that it's not doing me or them any good for me to be willing to accept a situation that really is intolerable to my sense of self-worth or to my sense of self-respect. And when I'm not saying that, you shouldn't make an effort to accept things that are difficult to accept, but, we all know that there's a point beyond which certain things cannot and should not be accepted, even if it means the relationship has to end. Not all relationships are meant to continue for whatever reasons. If people are unable or unwilling to make changes that the other person requires in order to maintain their own integrity, physical and emotional integrity, then it's not in anybody's best interest to continue that relationship. So I just want to remind you that there is a point where it's irresponsible not to say enough. Mm-hmm. I can't do this. And when I try to hang in there longer than is really healthy for me or the relationship, I'm going to build up resentment and I'm going to build up mistrust. And that's going to contribute to the problem that's already there.
And to get to the place where you can tell the truth about how intolerable it is, that it's too painful for you, you may need to work with the voices in your own mind about it's already past the point of no return. It's hopeless. Nobody can help me, because those doom kind of thoughts usually are not correct. And sometimes people give up on a relationship that has tremendous potential because they believe the ideas in their mind. And most people that divorce don't even go to marriage counseling even one time before they give up.
And this is an interesting statistic that's been verified, that the people who do choose to get into counseling have been in a very painful situation for 6 years before they've sought help.
That statistic breaks my heart, because we've been in the business for over 40 years and we've seen miraculous things happen. We've seen a lot of relationships that looked dead that were only in a coma, and they came back to life when they got some attention.
Not all relationships can or should be saved. And we don't know exactly whether ours is in one category or the other one, sometimes without getting some help. So we're simply encouraging you to be willing to get other input from somebody whose judgment you trust, because these are issues that are very challenging to deal with sometimes without some kind of assistance.
And you can only win, because even if the relationship, you come to the conclusion that you have to let go and you terminate the relationship, you do have the satisfaction of knowing you gave it your best, and you can leave with your head up high. You won't be haunted by the if onlys. We'd gone for counseling, if only we had, come out of hiding with our, shameful secrets.
Okay. So that's a little food for thought.
Uh-huh.
And we're just really grateful to you for tuning in. If you like this, pass the word, tell your friends. Next week, we're going to be, the title of our talk next week is going to be Love Isn't Something That You Fall Into. And you'll know more about that after you hear from us then. So until then.
Bring your comments and questions. We want to address them.
Thanks.